Before we start, let me say something that may sound surprising. If a home doesn't sell, the market usually isn't the problem. The strategy is. This may sound counterintuitive because most homeowners are told that the market determines how quickly homes sell. If the market is strong, homes move quickly. If the market slows down, listings take longer. While there is some truth to that, it's not the whole truth because markets rarely behave that evenly. In almost any market, some homes sell almost immediately while others sit for weeks, months, or sometimes even years. Often in the same neighborhood, even in the same street, at similar price points, and under the exact same market conditions. So the obvious question becomes this: what actually creates the difference? Why is there even a difference? To illustrate how this works, I analyzed the results in a luxury community here in Central Florida. Over a 6-month period, 5 homes sold in that neighborhood. Our team represented 3 of those 5 homes. But the interesting part is not in the number of homes. The interesting part is how those homes performed relative to the rest of the market. During that period, the average home in that community took 93 days to go under contract. It was 93 days to contract. Prior to that 6-month window, the average time to contract was between 118 and 120 days. That change was purely brought on by the homes we sold. There was no shift in the market. Even with that improvement, the homes we represented averaged 42 days to contract. Less than half the new average, and roughly 1/3 of the earlier average in the same market. Now, when homeowners see numbers like this, the first assumption is usually they sold the cheaper homes, or they priced their homes low, or something like that. They did something with the price. Maybe those homes sold faster because they were less expensive. And because of that, maybe they sold faster because they appealed to a larger pool of buyers. And I agree, this is a fairly fair assumption. The only problem with that explanation is that it doesn't really apply here. This community I'm talking about consists of 140 luxury homes with an average home value of roughly $1.5 million. All 3 homes we represented were priced above the community average, So this wasn't a case of lower priced homes selling faster. These were properties competing at the upper end of the neighborhood's price range. We had access to the same buyers as the other homes in our price range, the same market. We just created a very different result. Which brings me back to the real question here. What actually determines how quickly a home sells? To better understand that, I think it helps to look at how most real estate marketing works. In many cases, marketing is treated as exposure. The more exposure, the better. A home is listed in the MLS. It appears on real estate websites such as Zillow, Trulia, Realtor.com, and all the other ones. It may even be shared on social media by the real estate agent, and there may be some online advertising. From a distribution standpoint, that sounds like a lot of marketing. But distribution and creating demand are not the same thing. Exposure simply places the property in front of the general public. It doesn't necessarily place it in front of the most likely buyer. And that is a distinction that truly matters. Buyers today, especially in this price range, aren't browsing every home available. They're filtering. They're filtering by price, by location, by schools, by lifestyle preferences, by interests, by architectural style, by commute patterns, or even by the platform they choose to use. In other words, buyers are already segmented. If a property is marketed broadly but not strategically, the right buyer may never actually see it. It could drown in the sea of the many homes for sale. Or they might end up seeing it without recognizing that it's exactly what they've been looking for. When that happens, interest slows down, showings become inconsistent, time flies, meaning days on market begins to accumulate. And then eventually you as a seller face a very difficult choice. Should I wait longer? Should I adjust the price? And in this scenario, adjusting the price almost always means reducing it. Now, let me show you something that often makes this a lot easier to understand. If you look at the MLS data for that 6-month period, 5 homes sold and the average time to contract was 93 days. We've already been there. But averages can hide important details. Inside that number are homes that sold relatively quickly and also others that took much longer. When you break the data down property by property, a pattern becomes pretty clear. Some listings generated immediate interest. Showings happened quickly. Momentum was built. Those homes moved forward to contract quickly. Other listings struggled to generate early activity. And when a listing takes longer to gain traction, something important begins to happen. Buyers notice, agents notice, and the perception of the property begins to change. Instead of being seen as a new opportunity or even an opportunity at all, it begins to feel like a stale listing. And once that perception sets in, negotiation leverage begins to shift from you as a seller to the buyer. And buyers start asking a very different question. They're no longer asking, is this home right for me? They're asking, why hasn't this home sold yet? And that shift in perception can dramatically influence the outcome of the sale. Which brings us to another important part of this conversation. What happens when the strategy is wrong? What happens when a home enters the market without the right positioning, presentation, or buyer targeting? Well, several things usually occur. Firstly, the listing generates curiosity, but not urgency. Buyers may look at it online, they might even save it, but they don't feel compelled to act. Second, showing activity becomes inconsistent. Instead of steady interest, activity becomes sporadic. Thirdly, like I said before, time flies, which means property accumulates days on the market. And once a listing crosses a certain psychological threshold, like 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, 150 days, buyer behavior begins to change. Instead of seeing the home as a fresh opportunity, buyers automatically start assuming something must be wrong with that property, even when nothing actually is wrong with the property. That is why the first few weeks on the market are so critical. That window receives the highest level of attention from both buyers and their agents. If the property is positioned correctly during that period, momentum builds. If it isn't, the listing can spend months trying to recover that lost momentum. And there's another factor that plays an important role here. That's buyer psychology. It's important to notice that at the luxury level, buyers behave much differently than in the entry level or the mid-level market. Most luxury buyers are not purchasing because they need to. They're purchasing because they want a specific property. They most likely already own a home. They definitely have the financial flexibility to wait. This all means that they have the affordability, they can afford to be selective, and they are selective. However, when a property aligns with their lifestyle and their vision, they move quickly. But when it feels uncertain or poorly positioned relative to the alternatives, or they don't even see any potential, they simply move on. That's why marketing strategy becomes so important. Instead of starting with the property and broadcasting it everywhere, we begin by identifying the most likely buyer profile. In other words, who is most likely to purchase this specific home? Where are they currently living? What price ranges are they searching in? Do their lifestyles align with what this property offers? What features matter most to them? What motivates them to move? Only when you understand that buyer profile and you build that profile, the marketing strategy changes. The messaging becomes more precise. The placement of your marketing becomes more deliberate. And the property is introduced where those buyers are already paying attention. This approach is known as target marketing. Target marketing is not simply more advertising. It is focused marketing aimed at the most likely buyer. Instead of trying to reach everyone, we know everyone can't buy this home. The goal is to reach the right audience. The people who can buy it, want to buy it, need to buy it. They need to buy it because they see that this is the right home for them. Because the right buyer usually doesn't need convincing that a home is attractive if we just present it to them where they are in a way they understand and highlighting the features that are important to them. Then they simply just need to see it. And when the right buyer sees the right property, the decision process tends to move so much faster and price tag becomes irrelevant. To make this easier to visualize, imagine two homes entering the market in the same neighborhood at the same time. They're both similar in size. They're both well maintained. They are maybe be priced the exact same price. But the strategy behind how they're introduced to the market is very different. The first home is simply listed. It goes in the MLS, which automatically distributes it to the major real estate websites, Zillow, Realtor.com, Trulia, whatnot. Tons of real estate websites out there. The photos are quite decent. The description is acceptable but generic. It's visible to the public, but the marketing is largely passive. Now compare that to the second home. Before the second home even hits the market, the most likely buyer profile is identified and determined. Where do those buyers live? What price ranges are they currently searching? What are their interests? What features matters most to them? How do they typically discover homes like this? Where are they looking? What are their lifestyle? What's the lifestyle they're looking for? The home is then positioned exactly with those buyers in mind and exactly where they are. The presentation of the home highlights the lifestyle the property offers. And the marketing is placed right in front of those buyers. Both these homes are technically on the market. They are both visible online. But the second home is being strategically introduced to the most likely buyer, while the first home is simply waiting to be discovered. That difference might sound subtle, but in practice, it can dramatically influence how quickly a property gains momentum. And in real estate, early momentum and continuing momentum often determines the outcome. Now, the target marketing is only one part of the equation, probably the most important, but without the other three, it doesn't work. Because there are 4 leverage points that consistently influence how a property performs in the market. The first one is positioning, how the property is framed relative to competing homes. The second one is presentation, that involves staging, photography, video, the overall visual and verbative narrative of the property. The third one is pricing strategy. Pricing is not about choosing a number that feels comfortable comfortable or a number that you want as a seller. It's about positioning the property within the competitive landscape so buyers clearly recognize its value. Pricing too high or too low can both create serious problems in the long run and the short run for that matter. And the fourth one is the one we spend a lot of time on: buyer targeting, target marketing, placing the property in front of the audience most likely to purchase it. When these four elements align, positioning, presentation, pricing strategy, and buyer targeting, the probability of a faster sale increases significantly. When they do not align, the opposite usually happens. Homes sit longer, buyer interest weakens, and your negotiation leverage as a seller declines. The purpose of sharing this case study is to explain what actually drives outcome in the real estate market. Because from a homeowner's perspective, the most important question isn't and shouldn't be who can list the home. The more important question is this: what strategy will produce the strongest results? If you're considering selling, there are a few questions worth asking. Who is the most likely buyer for my home? Where are those buyers currently located? Where do they live? Where do they come from? How would the marketing reach them? What makes my property stand out relative to competing homes? And how will it be positioned so buyers recognize its value quickly? If those questions cannot be answered clearly, the marketing plan probably is incomplete. Every neighborhood has its own dynamics. Inventory level change, buyer demand shifts, interest rates influence behavior to a degree. Maybe not so much in this price range, but to a degree. But the principles that drive outcomes remain the same: positioning, preparation, and targeted exposure. Those elements determine how buyers respond. And that's why strategy matters more than most people realize. And that's why 3 homes could sell more than twice as fast as the others while competing at a higher price point.